Hello, my name is Jacob Toddson, and welcome back to the Wisdom of Odin. Today, we're going to be talking about America and why I believe America needs paganism. Obviously, I created the title of this video to be a little bit divisive. And so if you haven't been to this channel before, let me give you a brief overview of my journey so far. I was born here in the United States, in Ohio, and spent a lot of my time in Kentucky, where my family is from. And then in the last few years, I have traveled all over Europe and explored many different spiritual celebrations, from shamans to paganism, to Hindus and everything in between. Naturally, I was raised in the church, mostly Presbyterian and Baptist, and after the age of 18, realized the church wasn't for me, and I just explored many different beliefs, but ultimately it's always returned to nature to some degree. And in this channel, I've talked about Norse Paganism in particular, and also explored my Celtic roots as well, and also have a healthy dose of shamanism. And so all of these things influence this conversation. I truly believe I am a byproduct of the world that I live in and the area that I was born and raised. And I think my story is similar to a lot of people in their 30s now, or even in their 20s. And that is a lot of the American situation as well, in the sense that America is a very young country, and we do have a lot of good going for us, namely the nature and the land that we live on. But also the history of our country is very complicated, and arguably we've not had a lot of good years, in the sense that the vast majority of our time as a nation has been spent at war, and we rely on war and our military in order to make money. We very much are a very young version of the Roman Empire. And with that, we are also having the very problems of the Roman Empire towards their fall. And so in this video, we're going to be discussing a lot of very large topics. And so obviously with that, I cannot talk to all the nuances of these conversations. And this is a very broad topic video. And so I'm not saying that I have 100% the truth on this, and I want to hear your thoughts down below. Ultimately, I came back to this country despite having a deep love of Scotland and Europe, because I want to see this country get better. And for me, the way I see this country getting better is for more people returning to pagan tradition. So let's talk about it. In my opinion and observation, the American identity was at its strongest post-World War II. Because when it came to this identity of America, we had this manifest destiny, this migration west before the Great Wars, and then afterwards we had this identity of we saved the world. And so those two things really came together in the American identity of the 1950s. And we had a really great booming economy, we still had our problems, but for the most part, America's #1 spot in the world was kind of solidified. And this didn't last for very long. I mean, we started seeing that decline into the 1970s with the Vietnam War and in the 1980s, and then we had a little bit of a resurgence in the 90s, and then it's all been kind of downhill since then. And it's really not gotten any better. It seems like every single year, every single election cycle, the American identity continues to devolve into something that many are not proud of, including myself. And my explanation for this is because the American identity was so young and so fragile that once it started to crumble, we were left with no roots, because the people that migrated to this country and built this country were either forced into it or they were leaving something behind. And so often the people that came to the US, majority, when we talk about white Europeans, we're talking about Germans, we're talking about the Irish and the Scottish, and they were leaving a country in shambles. And so they were leaving behind their identities. My own natural born last name was completely made up because of the Scottish ancestry that I have. The people from Scotland that were migrating to the US were migrating here out of shame because they lost the war to the English and lost their freedom. And so a lot of the people coming to this country left behind their clan names out of shame and regret. And then a lot of Irish were, of course, changing their name as well, because there was a lot of prejudice against the Irish people in the 1800s. And so to be Irish meant you weren't getting a job. And so a lot of people changed their name as well. A lot of the German people, of course, after the war, changed their names because of shame of World War II and the Great War as well. And so a lot of people shed those identities. And then, of course, people with African ancestry were brought here against their free will. Of course, there's a lot of forgotten knowledge there. And then, of course, the Native American peoples as well, their lands being taken from them. And so that identity, of course, is broken and injured as well. And so we're a country made up of people of forgotten, lost, or stolen identities. And so we made the American identity our identity, and it propelled us for a long time. But I think with the lack of our ancestral roots, if you don't have strong roots, don't have a strong foundation, you yourself are left fragile and looking for an identity. And when we are looking for an identity and we don't know who we are, we're so vulnerable and so weak to being influenced from the outside world, so easy to be taken advantage of, and so easy to be emotional and angered. And look at our country. Look at what we've become. We're a country of lost, angry, emotional, and easy to manipulate people. And people are taking advantage of that. The powers that be, our own government, take advantage of that. And so the only way for us to move forward is to build stronger roots and a more healthy and secure foundation. 2 disclaimers. 1, this doesn't have to be religious. If you want to believe in God or Jesus or Allah or Buddha or Odin, it doesn't matter. What truly matters is connecting to our ancestors and to nature. We're going to talk about that more. And then the second thing here is when it comes to the color of our skin versus our ancestry, our race, and things like that, is I believe ancestry is so very important. But the moment we start saying one culture is more superior than another one, that's when we have issues. And so by no means in any part in this conversation am I saying one culture is superior to another one. What I'm saying is all of us have ancestors. All of our ancestors are equally as important. And honoring those lineages, honoring where we came from, is what is most important. But they should never be weaponized to say one is superior over the other.
Another big inspiration for this video also came from the very place that I'm filming in right now. This is a recreation or a restored log cabin here, old style Western frontier cabin. And it's a good reminder to us, especially me. I live in a city now, a very convenient city with all the modern amenities, but only 2 generations ago, something like this is where my family was living in. My family comes from the eastern hollers of Kentucky, and I've seen the family land, and let me tell you, it was something like this. And I'm pretty sure it had dirt floors as well. This is a common story among many people in America and all around the world, is our world has developed and changed so quickly that we went from a species of people who predominantly lived in the countryside to people that predominantly live in major cities more and more every single year. And the numbers are really quite shocking. I'll put some of them here, but it's happening everywhere. I mean, I know Japan, it's happening to a great extent. But all around the world, more and more young people choose to live in the big cities, and therefore less and less people are there to live in the countryside and maintain them. And so one of the problems that comes with that is a disconnect between city people and country people, which is another major issue we see in the US. And I think one of the major things that is different among country people versus city people, and again, this is just me kind of spitballing here, but it's something that's really stuck, is city people typically are more educated, but country people are more wise. And I think we need both. We need the education, the science, the math, the understanding of the literal universe, but we also need the wisdom. We need the knowledge of the old ways, the folk tales, the customs, and all of this. We need them both equally. And I think we're in balance because so many people are living in the city. So many people are getting educated, but are less wise. And that's something I realize every single time I talk to my grandfather, is I might have more education. I might be able to pronounce things more eloquently sometimes, but he is so much more wise than me. And I think we are witnessing a society of people who lack wisdom, and we need it so desperately right now. And I think the wisdom exists within paganism, exists within the heath.
Now, the word pagan might invoke really negative imagery. Obviously, if you grew up in the church like me, the word pagan is very alien and very taboo. And so what you picture is, probably big fire, people covered in blood or something like that, something very aggressive or Satanist or something like that. But the actual definition of the word pagan comes from the word pagani, and it simply means people who exist in the countryside or the country folk. And this was used about at the time of conversion of Rome, when they started designating between people who existed in the countryside and then the people who existed within the cities. And so you had the people, the Pagani, who had country folk tradition. They believed in spirits in the woods, they believed in the old medicines, and then you had the city people. And so when I talk about pagan, I'm not really talking about what gods you follow. That is an element to it, of course, but what I'm mostly referring to is the country and folk traditions. And what I witness, as we've already discussed in this video a little bit, is the death of the country and folk tradition, and our desperate need to return to those things as more of us move into the big cities.
What I want to share with you now is my advice for everyday people, especially people like me who are young and live in a city. How can we become more pagan? Not in the religious sense, but in the sense of achieving that wisdom, of gaining that wisdom from the countryside and bringing it back to our cities, merging that with education, merging with the future, and building a better society through that.
The first piece of advice I have for you today when it comes to kind of connecting to these things I'm talking about, we're talking about ancestry here. So the most direct line we have to our ancestors, if your family members are still alive, is talking to our elders. And this is a really big one, and it's something that's become more and more important to me. This year, both of my grandmothers have passed, and so I just have a grandfather left. And it's becoming just ever more clear that my connection to the elders in my family is just drying up so fast. And so if you're lucky enough to still have elders in your family, reach out to them. This is just, oh my gosh, they're not gonna be around forever, and that's just, yeah, it's hitting me hard this year. And so we can kind of look at our grandparents, the elders in our family, and kind of scoot them aside and be like, oh, I don't want to hear that story again. But I really encourage you, sit down and really practice your compassionate listening skills. Maybe even write stuff down. Ask them questions you wouldn't normally ask them, and gather as much wisdom from them as you can. And then if your family members, you don't have any elders in your family left, there's elders all over the world. And so seek out other elders. If you know any elderly people in your neighborhood, if you go to a coffee shop and you see someone, drinking alone, offer to buy them a coffee, sit and chat with them. We all know that a lot of elderly people really want to share and really want to talk. And in our world of TikTok and the internet, our children are going to the internet far more than they go to the elders. But 100, 200 years ago, the only place, there was no Google, there was only grandfather and grandmother. They're the ones that you went to ask questions, and our parents. As we discussed earlier in the video, a lot of the times as Americans, we struggle to find where we're from. We struggle to find our identity because so often than not that our families left it behind or it was taken from them. As I said, with my own family, finding anything past like 1850 is incredibly difficult. And so it's been a very intuitive journey, but it did lead me to Scotland. And it's from there that my deep dive really began. And so I really highly encourage, follow the threads of your family as deep and as far back as you can about where you came from. And the many different directions. I mean, especially as Americans, we're made up of so many different ancestries and lineages so often than not. And so following those threads as far back as you can and seeing how diverse your background is. For me, I've discussed it before, I have Scottish, I have German, I have some Danish in me, I have some French in me, and there's some Cherokee in me as well. And so all of these go back in so many different beautiful directions, as there's so much I can draw from. It can just get a little overwhelming and understanding of how much makes us, us. And then once you kind of find that direction, you find where your family came from, start looking into the folklore, start looking into the old traditions that come from those cultures. And if that takes you as far back as worshiping the same gods that your ancient ancestors did, great. That's what it did for me. I went so far back, I was like, okay, what were the Danish, the German ancestors, who were they worshiping? Who were my Scottish ancestors worshiping? What were they connecting to? That's what worked for me. That doesn't necessarily have to be the path that you go on, but I still highly recommend looking into the folklore, the stories, the fairy tales, looking into the ancient symbolism that connected your family to the past, and then looking so far back that it gets a little bit muddy. And for me, that goes into the shape of like the very ancient symbols, goes into the stone circles, Stonehenge. We know virtually nothing about the people that built Stonehenge or the stone circles, but they're tied to our global past. I mean, we see the pyramids, stone circles, labyrinths, all these things are connected to who we are as humans. And so going to these ancient sites, going and seeing these ancient symbols is something that we all possess a connection to. And I think that's really beautiful. And so I really love the study of these ancient symbols. And so that's why my next journey for me is connecting to the ancient symbols of the past and heritage in the form of ceremonial tattoo. And so that is a way you can kind of get to know me a little bit more as a creator, take part in this next journey. I am posting on Instagram at the Wisdom of Odin, but I'm getting into ceremonial tattoo through hand poke technique, the ancient traditions. And so if you do want a tattoo from me, I'm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio now. And yeah, I have all my information on my website. Feel free to email me, and I would love to discuss with you a connection you have to your ancestry, to the past and the symbols of the past, and possibly getting that as a tattoo for you. So yeah, if you're interested, please email me on my website. But truly, the thing that I feel like my purpose is in this life is helping people connect to their ancestors. And tattooing, ceremony, these videos all help me do that. Because that connection to our ancestors is just so powerful and so important. It really helps us connect more to who we are, gives us that foundation we need. And so if it can help an individual so much to connect to the roots of the past, I think if we as a nation, we as a country, a group of people connect to the roots of the past, can only build something beautiful and magical if we connect to those ancient magics, the magics that our ancestors carried with them for thousands of years. Now, this next piece of advice should be pretty obvious if you've been to my channel before, and that is quite simply get out into nature as much as possible. Again, city person now, getting into nature is such a gift for me, and it's something I don't get to do as often as I like anymore, but it's become ever more important for me. This is about 30 minutes from where I live now. It is a little bit of longer drive, but man, do I so need it. You know, waking up to the sound of jackhammers and there's just construction everywhere. Yeah, I love being able to walk across the street and get my morning cup of coffee. But what I have to trade off for that, the anxiety, the noise that a city creates, the impure air. Now, I can't give you like a number of how much you need to get into nature. That's ultimately up to you and your own schedule. But the real answer is as much as possible. Finding a park, finding something that you can go out, get some cleaner air, see some green, see some animals. We all know that the earth is changing. We all know that we are destroying the environment. We are having an impact to some degree. And so taking a moment to get out into nature and remember that we ourselves are children of nature is so very important, especially if you live in a city. I'm not admittedly the best with my hands, but I think one of the best ways to connect to the ancestors, connect to our humanity, is to work with our hands. And there's a few ways you can do that. If you're able, working in a garden. The amount of people that I listen to, both young and old, who talk about how important working in a garden is pretty incredible. In the blue zones of the world, if you don't know what a blue zone is, it's areas of the world where people live more often above the age of 100 and around the age of 100. One of the most important things they have in common is they usually are working with their hands, either working in a garden, working the fields, growing their own food, or at the very least, creating art. One of the hardest lessons, I think, for most humans is understanding that we are all artists and creators. Now, that might look different for everyone, and for the longest time, it might be this idea that like, oh, you had to be a painter or a sculptor. That's not necessarily true. All of us can create to some degree, create music, create literal art, create with our hands in a garden, woodwork, draw, paint mailboxes. It doesn't matter. We're all creative in our own ways. And we just have to find what flavor of creativity we all possess. And so the journey of creativity, finding out what makes you creative, is an important part of life, and finding out what that looks like for you. The next piece of advice I want to give you might be hard to describe a little bit, but that is nurturing community. And the reason I say this is difficult is because our definition of what community is very different these days. In the ancient past, it was just your tribe, the immediate people around you, and the nomadic lifestyle, or the people around your farm or village. We didn't travel as far as we used to. The very fact that we as a society don't know our neighbors is very alien probably to the people of the ancient past. The more we started moving in next to each other in these high-rise buildings or apartment complexes, the less we knew each other. I mean, I live in a building with probably 30 other people, and I don't know a single one of their names, and this is not uncommon. And so we have found our community less so in our immediate vicinity and more online these days. I would say a large majority of people I know are not near me. They're all around the world or all around the US. And so my immediate local community is quite small versus my global community, which is quite large. And that is very different than the people that existed in the past. And so my challenge to myself, but also to people here, is to get more involved in your local community. And I think this can be really beneficial because at the end of the day, the people we live next to are the ones we're stuck with, the ones that are going to be there during times of crisis, during whatever comes next. And so having a close-knit community, I think, is so very important and something that helps us stay connected to our evolutionary roots. We're a communal species, and we really need to be around other people. And in a world full of loneliness, of anxiety, of depression, of suicide, I think one of the leading causes of this is a lack of a strong community. And this is something I think has kept the American church system alive when the church is kind of falling everywhere else. I mean, Christianity is on the decline in nearly every country, but America, I think it's actually on the rise again. And I think one of the reasons for this is because the church community is probably one of the strongest aspects of it here in the US. Is if you go to church, you're going to church with people that are close by. They're having events, and you can meet local people. You can find people of similar values and belief systems as you. And ultimately, this is not what the purpose of community is to be there for one another. You need to check out this mushroom. Whoa. It's so bright and white. Look at that thing. Huh. That's really cool. Isn't nature cool? I love that. Look at that. Look at that guy. He's so pretty. Sorry. But I hope that makes sense. For me, this is a dangerous slippery slope I'm about to enter. But something I've always been on the fringes of is when someone tells me, oh my God, did you see the travesty that was just committed 1,000 miles away? Like, did you hear about the people that died on the other side of the planet? And my first reaction has always been, well, do you live there? Because to me, it's so backwards. We don't care about the people that are right around us. And yet, a lot of us get so fixated on people that are dying or suffering on the other side of the planet. And while I don't like that that's happening, at the end of the day, I am more committed to caring about the people around me. Because in a world where more people care about the children on the other side of the planet and not the starving ones in their own neighborhood, things are a bit backwards. So what I encourage people to do is if you hear about something that's happening on the other side of the planet, whether it's people dying of disease or people dying of starvation or dying to war, feel that, but then turn that energy towards your local community. Get more involved in the starving children in your area. Get more involved in the people that are suffering here. Volunteer, work for nonprofits. My God, as someone who helps run a nonprofit, nonprofits are always in need of help and money. And so help whatever way you can in your local community. You can feel for people around the world, but then find a way to turn that energy towards your community. My final piece of advice in this long-winded video, and I should say, I can't capture everything in this one, and that's why I have a library of over 400 videos. And so if you found this one entertaining or enlightening, please make sure you check out the other ones. I have lots of different stuff from all around the world, from my travels, and videos similar to this. But the final thing I want to share here teeters on the shamanic and the spiritual, and as it should in a video such as this. And that is reminding us and finding time to remind ourselves the natural world is sacred, and the human experience is sacred because this is a gift. I think a lot of people would say that it's the worst time to be alive because of the global conflicts that we have. But I could argue that now is the best time to be alive because we have never had such ability to travel, such connectivity, such amazing technologies, such ability to live long and healthy lives. But we have new challenges that our species have never faced before. Dealing with gluttony, dealing with our pride, dealing with these deadly sins that our ancestors have talked about before as well. We have a lot of very interesting struggles ahead of us. And I don't have the answers to all of them, but I do think I have one answer, and that is returning to these pagan traditions to build a better future. And part of that is looking at the natural world and the human experience as sacred. an understanding that our ancestors didn't have such easy access to food, to clean water, to clean air, to life, to medical resources. In America, we have such a beautiful gift in our abundance of resources, of natural beauty, of food, of water, and we take all of that for granted. And the longer we take that for granted, the more quietly and steadily we slide into losing those things because we have mistreated that gift. And so my final thing I want to say, and advice for this video, as far as returning to paganism, returning to nature, returning to the countryside and the wisdom of the ancestors, we need to see our great gift in this country as sacred. Honor that sacredness. Take moments to slow down from our busy lives in our cities, to reflect on what we should be grateful for, to pray, to give offerings, to thank God or Odin or Gaia, the natural earth mother, Teowa or Sadihega, whatever you want to say. Take a moment to slow down and reflect on the sacred beauty of our planet. If every person in America could do that, take a moment to reflect on the sacred. We're already one step closer to making this country a better place, to honoring this land in the way it needs to be honored. So that's all I hope to share with you in this video. It's how to see our beautiful land, to see the beautiful people here in a sacred way.